What's happening, y'all? We are back acquiring and operating or buying and building a portfolio of enduring niche vertical B2B SaaS firms. And here's the cool part that punch like $50 million ARR firms. I've been leaving that out mostly, but we're fixated on super high operating leverage, kind of high impact teams, and doing that in the corners of the B2B software world where you don't get competition from venture-backed players because the markets aren't big enough, and playing in a segment of the market revenue-wise that's a little bit below the radar, private equity. We're having fun. We're swishing and dishing, jiving and driving. We got some action that's on the cusp. I know we keep saying that week over week. Damn, one of these days we'll just do a session on updates. But the topic du jour is a first 90 days go-to-market plan. First F90, F100, there's kind of some different ways to think about it, but it is a very, very important concept in our game. And in terms of a table of contents, so we'll talk about a phase-based summary of the first 90-day plan that we put together that's fixated on go-to-market. And then we'll lean into a work stream-based summary. And then, of course, we've got kind of the actionable project plan in a Notion table for you. There you go. So it's kind of, what would we call it? Sterilized, generalized. So you'll definitely need to tune it up, but hopefully it gets, you from 0 to 1.
Yeah.
Before we jump,
what's that? Use it as a framework. Pretty standardized, but use it as a framework.
Totally. And it's got some modern stuff. Like you might suggest that there could be a little bit more inclusion of like a convergence of product and growth. This one is kind of OG in the sense that it's really kind of siloed and fixated on sales-led growth. But that's all good. It's, again, a point of departure. And I guess with that, kind of a few disclaimers. So foundational context is you just took ownership of a B2B SaaS business. And the core segments that the business serves now are mid-market and enterprise. And so you're keen to install a sales-led growth motion because it's very common the case that the founder's technical, kind of product-centric. There's probably not much sales, quote unquote, infrastructure. So your thesis is we're going to install that and grow the hell out of it. And it's going to be great. With that said, some context or an extension of that that's a little bit more subjective, but just some observations that I've made and just some things that I would kind of emphasize or reinforce. Like the OG saying is never let a good crisis go to waste. And this doesn't necessarily apply. I think if you abstract out of that, it's like never let a good trigger event go to waste. And so in this context, when you take ownership, it's an opportunity to really impact the culture. And when I say that, I mean introduce a totally new sense of urgency, a totally new expectation around the pace of execution, and then obviously a huge focus on growth. So you're coming in there as a change agent. It's like, woo, all right, here we go. We got this crew. We're going to do this thing. Here's the boom, to the room, to the room, to the room, to the room. Because if you kind of come in there on your heels and you just kind of waste an opportunity. So that's one thing. And then I guess I'm going to talk out of the other side of my mouth that the worst thing you can do is come in and just start moving furniture. It's like, let's put a new front door in. Let's, tear down the garage. So I guess as I wrote in here, like if there was a billboard, if the first 90 days had a billboard, it would read stability, learning, and transition. So even if you get through the first 90 days and you're like, damn, we didn't really get, a ton of kind of fix, improve, or build activities done. It's like, cool. Did you document the SOPs? Did you validate a lot of your theories and theses or components of the thesis when you were towards the tail end of final diligence? It's like, yeah, okay, then that was super productive time. Like, did you churn a bunch of customers? No? Okay, happy days. So you got to balance those two things, and that's where this stuff gets tricky. A final thought here, and this comes into like operating model. The first 90 days is very task oriented. So, and you hate to just run around doing tasks. So ideally you can abstract above the tasks and be like, okay, ChatGPT is great for this. Read the patterns. What are 3 OKRs that we could map up, most of these activities towards so that you're super clear on like, hey, here are the 3 things we want to achieve in the first 90 days. And then some will have, tons of detail, et cetera, and tons of tasks. Others are just pretty straightforward. But ideally, you can distill this down somehow so that everybody's super clear. These are the 3. It's not like, well, I got to do this, and I got to do that, and I got to do this, and everybody's spinning around, confused as shit. It's like, I've got these 3. The team is doing these 3 things in the first 90 days, and I know that this task generally associates with that. Cool. And if you can't do that, because I appreciate it's difficult, the hope is as soon as that first 90 days wraps, you are progressing to a traditional kind of quarterly OKR rhythm. You can also think about the first 90 days as 3 30-day sprints. So there's some different ways to slice and dice it. But
anywho, I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, please,
As you're
please.
like describing all of it, it reminds me of that show, The Prophet. We come in kind of like the wrecking crew. It's like, yeah, we want to give you some capital. We want to help out. We're going to take over. But first, we're the like the pitfalls, the gotchas. Show me where all the bodies are buried, right? So as you're talking about it, I think the wrecking crew is the wrong terminology. Ideally, it's how do we help this company grow so it's beneficial for everyone that's involved. We don't want to look like the guys that are just coming in and start moving furniture on day one. So as you were describing, I just to get that kind of differentiation in my mind. It's like, hey, we are not the prophet.
Yeah, totally. Or you're definitely not the wrecking crew.
Yeah.
And then I think like the distinction then is kind of, and I was talking to a colleague about this. It's like, you're hopefully, I guess traditionally private equity can kind of come across like miners. Like they come in and they're like, we're going to extract the minerals, and to hell with the employees and the customers. We're going to extract value and be on our way. So we always like to maintain the posture that we're farmers. So
I like
again,
that.
the last thing you want to do when you come in is start swapping out tractors and doing stuff. It's like, hey, let's get a feel for things. And it's also very funny. I always call it like the skeleton convo, where it's like, once you close an acquisition, you visit with the founders and it's like, all right, put all the cards on the table. What's all the horrible shit you've been kind of hiding up until now? It's
Yeah. Tell me your
it's like
worst
we
dark
don't,
secret.
yeah, it's like, where are the bodies buried, man? Where's this, what's on fire right now? So anywho, so let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen and we will do this. And I'm just going to jump into the actual Notion space, but I did want to start with kind of these summaries because I think they're good. And so we have kind of two flavors of the summaries. The first flavor is the phase. And so the phases meaning kind of a chronological breakdown. So you've got the first 30 days, you've got day 30 to 60, and then you've got day 60 to 90. So it kind of speaks to the progression and where your focus should be at any given point in time. And then we'll look at an actual kind of work stream based summary, which is a little bit similar, but I think looking at it through these two lenses is very good, and it should support your comprehension before you just dive into the project plan. So day 1 through 30, the headlines are customer communication and relationship transition. And you've got to be sensitive with this one. And I guess you want to cultivate a plan in the first 30 days. This isn't so much suggesting day one, it's like, hey, I own the business now. Like, just assume that the customer base and the users are going to see this as a negative development. Change is scary. So it's, you're doing damage control. So it's like reinforcing what you're there to do, crafting a game plan that's generally pretty easy to follow. That's like, here's how we're going to spend the first 6 months. These are some expectations you can hold us accountable to, stuff like that. But you definitely want to be clear on like, these are the beats, and it's treated like a PR campaign. Like there's going to be 3 communications across these channels. And that's just kind of like one to many. The one-to-one is you're probably doing, maybe you're doing a little tour and you're going to go meet with, and ideally there's not a ton of customer concentration. That's a very risky thing. So it's not like, shit, I need to meet with the customers that represent 20%, 30% of our revenue. It's like, oh boy. So assume that no customer represents more than 10% of your revenue. You want to just get out there and meet them. And back to kind of like trigger events, this is a really good opportunity. And we'll get into like voice of customer interviews and stuff like that. But this is a really good opportunity to be like, here we are. This is what we're about. This is what we plan for the thing. We're going to make this thing way more valuable, hopefully, to you. We're going to invest in product. We're going to invest in customer success, all these things. And at the same time, it's like, what sucks? What are we doing well right now? Like, it's a really good time to establish a baseline, and you can think about it as an NPS if you want, but surveys are super useful to include with that announcement. But anyway, customer communication and the transition of key relationships is obviously mission critical. Sales team analysis is next up. And I guess this is very context dependent. If there's a salesperson, if there's 5, if there's none, like our assumption is there's generally none, maybe 1. So it's just kind of quickly sizing up what's there. And then you get into market and customer analysis. And so this is you'll sort of sense. So it's like, all right, transition. Let's look at some things that we couldn't really look closely at in diligence until we did the deal. Now let's get into the market and customer stuff. And ideally, you've got 70 to 80% of this done. So it's like, we have a point of view on the ICP. We have a point of view on the customer segments, et cetera. And then I guess another assumption here is like, assume that the record keeping is not awesome, especially as it relates to revenue and customers.
It's going to be dog shit.
Yeah. So it's like, at best, it's in a CRM. At worst, it's spread across 10 systems and God knows what. So in that, the kind of market and customer analysis, the first thing is a centralized view of all the customers. It can be in a spreadsheet. It can be in a BigQuery data warehouse, whatever. And it's like, cool, these are our customers. This is when they started with us. These are the products they use. This is how much they pay us. This is what their usage looks like. That's probably starting to get too detailed. But it's like, cool, we've got a general handle on our customers. And then you can enrich the shit out of it with anything that's available to you. What's the firmographic data? Where are they based? What segment or what category do they fit into, et cetera, et cetera. And this all then kind of lends towards, or that creates the surface area where you can start to actually validate ICP. And ideally, you'll find one like weird thing in there where it's like, oh yeah, all of our they're all mid-market companies in the Northeast. It's like, all right, cool. It's like, ooh, that have all participated in this conference in the last 5 years. Ooh, or all have above 4 stars on whatever. So you're looking for like a weird, like little thread the needle kind of pattern there, because that'll help you really understand what your real segment is. Don't just default to like, we sell to mid-market. So that's that. Anything you'd add there, Kev? And I guess one disclaimer for you, dude, is I left all this like real RevOps stuff out of here. That's its own thing. So I like touch on it a little bit, but that's your wheelhouse. So I was like, that's its own project plan.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other separate conversation. I was going to ask one trick question for you. So we do a great job of qualifying the types of deals or conversations to do some due diligence into before we step into it. Let's say someone is looking at a potential deal. The trick question is, worst case scenario, we said everything is spread across multiple systems and spreadsheets and documents. What if there's no documentation and it's all between the two ears of the one founder, single point of failure? What would you do in that scenario? But the company looks great. He just did it all himself. What would you do in that scenario?
Yeah. Well, I guess you have to assume that there's some system of record in place. And it can be as simple as like, how are you getting paid, dude? And it's like there has to be some paper trail somewhere. And that's a good point of departure where it's like, oh, we use QuickBooks to send invoices. Okay. Or we're using Stripe or we're using whatever. And usually like you just follow the money. So that's like usually a point of departure. And then Google Analytics always exists. Like there's some surface area that's kind of persistent and it's in the background and maybe founders don't really know about it. So you just got to kind of tap into it and you'll have a point, like you'll have some base there to work from. Obviously you'll need to tune just about everything. But I think the big takeaway here is like this can be a ratchet ass spreadsheet at the beginning. Like it's not like, oh man, we need to get this all implemented in the CRM or get all this data dictionary sorted out and yada, yada, yada. It's like, nah, dude, we need a spreadsheet that we can run queries against and we can do some pattern recognition because we're just really doing kind of validated work right now. That's going to be very, very foundational for us, which is who's our ICP right now? What are the core customer segments? Which segment drives the most revenue, which segment drives the greatest retention. And then you'll see an expansion is like, and that's another kind of misnomer or kind of a misguided belief in traditional like private equity venture or whatever. Like there's so much fixation on new logos. It's like, what's new logo growth look like? It's like, dude, what kind of expansion opportunity? Like sell to the people that are already in your building.
Yeah.
Don't go find new tenants. It's a lot harder to find new tenants. So anywho,
make your existing customers more happy, essentially.
Exactly.
For that,
or
to
it's like,
expand that
yo,
LTV.
like, we can grow the business 20% if we just execute one expansion campaign.
Exactly. Or give them one add-on they've been asking for forever.
Totally. So you want to kind of go to where or find the path of least resistance.
Absolutely. And one other thing I'd add to that, perfect explanation on your end. One other thing I'd add to that from the RevOps side of things, you can explore or open up a lot of opportunities for, let's say, expanding that LTV, selling to your customers, refining your mission, just opening up more opportunities for the company or just expanding the surface area for opportunities within the company as you go through the due diligence. Because whatever is not documented, as you start to dive in and realize we should have been documented. Say, for example, becoming revenue sharing partners with a payment processor. That's something you learn going through that due diligence process. Like, wait, our users have moved so much revenue. We haven't been paying attention to it. And now we get this partnership where we get to pull some of that revenue back in rev share partnership. Right there, that's a lever you can pull to expand valuation on the deal immediately.
And that's where just you got to, as a team, always kind of pick at each other around first principles. It's like, well, we're going to install this sales-led growth thing. And it's like, all right, like, because they don't have one, right? And it's like, okay, well, make me believe.
Yeah. What does Rice say?
Is there a user-led opportunity? Is there a partnership channel opportunity? Is there an ambassador rev share arrangement? is this in terms of leverage, the fastest path to revenue? Like we can bolt on new revenue streams in the form of payment, blah, blah, blah. So ideally you have kind of a baked point of view, but your job is to come in and really critically tear down whatever your assumptions were coming in and build a lot of conviction. And at this point, you should have a lot more data at your disposal. So just be careful. It's like, well, if the answer is like, well, that's what you do, then it's like, F you. Like that is not an acceptable response to a damn thing.
Nope. We are data driven.
That's it, dude. No, kind of just, that's what everyone does. And then map the customer journey to identify friction points. And so mapping the customer journey is also super helpful to then put that to the data stack to then put that into the tech stack. So very useful exercise. It can get very soft. It's like, oh, this is when they're peak elation. Like I don't really get into like the emotional states. It's like they're at this place, they found us this way, they're aware of the, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's a useful exercise, but it gets fluffy pretty quick. All right. So first 30 days, you got a game plan around how to communicate to customers. You're solving for churn, period, and stability and building confidence and belief that you're going to be good stewards of the business. Take stock of the sales team there, kind of the capability, and size that up. Scorecards are your best friend. Synthetic, simulations are your best friend. Hopefully there's some game film you can watch if they've been recording their stuff on Fathom or whatever. Then get into market and customer analysis. First thing is a centralized thing to just dump as much information as you possibly can about your customer base. Then you can identify some patterns. You can run some segmentation work. You can define ICP. And ICP is the bullseye. Segments are kind of the flavors of the bullseye. So that's that. And then, we didn't really talk much about this, and this is an extension of the customer communication and relationship transition, but voice of customer interviews. When you get in, it's like, I want to talk to 5 customers a week for 4 weeks at minimum. Like you're talking to every customer under the sun. This is when you get so much primary research and market interaction done. It's outstanding. And that kills so many birds with one stone. It's just a super productive exercise. All right, days 31 and 60. So now you'll start to hear words like strategy, universe building, SOPs, optimization, enablement. So you've got kind of a foundation underneath you. Go to market strategy. Now you're starting to think about channel strategy and paid ad experiments. So this is like, what's the cheapest way for us to learn? Probably some cheap ass ads. It's like, we think this is a home run segment. Let's test some ads and kind of validate that with objective data that this is going to be our highest conversion, our highest probability segment. We think these 2 channels are very interesting. We're going to do account-based marketing, ABM, like a minimum viable ABM, and we're going to run that in parallel with a partnership strategy. So this is very much like test and validate and pay to learn as it relates to like the strategy component. At the same time, you want to start to build your universe and prospect universe. You can call it TAM, you can call it whatever the hell you want, but it's like, I want eyes on every business under the sun that is a candidate for this product. You hate to buy leads, so that's a good, you can start there, but it's like, I would encourage, based with where we're at right now, web scrape everything.
Literally,
Web scrape,
take it all.
competitor websites, Google search results, directories, conference attendees, you name it, Yelp, scrape it all, and then use that stuff to enrich it. And it's like, okay, cool. So now we've got eyes on. So we have a definable, actionable. And then I think getting there, like eyes on is different from actionable. Actionable means you've got contact details, and that's a different can of worms. And that's where the money starts to rack up, honestly. But you want to establish a universe of like, this is our world. These are our customers. These are the people who have looked at us in the last year and a half. These are the people that we're in process with right now. And you're just thinking that the whole TAM is a funnel, and you're just moving them down and nurturing them into customers.
Another quick tech tip right there.
Yeah.
You want to think about data scraping, nurturing, and enriching your customers as they follow through the funnel as a waterfall model. At every step of that funnel, there's going to be a new data point living somewhere across the web. It might not be LinkedIn, it might be their social profile, but you want to think of scraping as, let's say, a waterfall where you want to map out all the sources where you could potentially find your customer, sit with your customer, see what it is they're talking about, line all of those sources up, and then just run your scraper to take one point from each one, create a full profile like your own customer data platform, and away you go. Now you can easily and seamlessly follow them along the funnel, and you can keep your messaging in line with their buying behavior, that buying pattern at that stage in the funnel.
Well, and a beautiful part too is, and you just kind of made me think of this, is like, as they work down the funnel, you get more surface area for enrichment. So then it's like, they're in our pipeline. What stage are they at? What's intent look like? Doom. Okay, cool. They just bought this thing. Great. Which products did they buy? Cool. They're now using this thing. Great. What's their usage look like? And that, right. So the waterfall analogy is outstanding, and you can really, it goes deep. Okay. So now stuff that don't sound sexy, but damn, it's important. So sales documentation and SOPs. So like, you want to just first audit. It's like, all right, how is the sales process structured today? And I guess this bleeds a little bit into sales process optimization, but basically you just want to look at like, all right, and power law is very much in play here, but it's like the sales team needs kind of these 5 things. One is a guide, or, whatever they are, and make sure that they're there. And if they're not, then you got to, I guess, fill the gap. So step 1 is to kind of audit it. And then SOPs too, because you can only repeat what's documented. So you want to make sure, and for your sales team, you don't want them spending a single second on brain dead work. It's like, oh, This is a thing. Cool. Pull up the SOP and crank through it. Don't expend a kilowatt of mental energy on this. Reserve that for engaging the market. So SOPs are to try and strip the thinking out of as much as humanly possible. And this is where it comes back into like the transition period. So like, assume the CEO is like a sales CEO. Your job is to extract all the tribal knowledge between his or her ears and turn it into an SOP, because in 30, 60, 90 days, that person is leaving the business. And, you hate to get to the end. That's back to like, even if you just get everything documented, it's productive 90 days, whatever.
Quick tech tip there to make it sexy, because that is literally creating an SOP is the most brain dead part of any job. I hate it. You hate it. We all hate it. To make it sexy, shameless plug, Scribe How and Loom.
Yeah, Loom.
All of your conversations, screencasts, you Scribe How, turn it on while you're clicking around. It will turn it into an SOP for you. Our mission is always within our operating model. Take your CRM and your systems. That should handle 95% of the lift, while your users only have to pull another level, or manually 5% of the time with the SOPs that you provided. So please use tools to even create documentation. Make that faster.
Yeah. Or just make it brain dead. And it's like, cool, I'm going to Loom this thing. Cool. Now I have a transcript. I'm going to drop the transcript in ChatGPT, turn this into an SOP. Boom, drop it in Notion. Have a nice day. But Loom, it's like literally just whoever the founder is, tell them to leave Loom on for the first 90 days.
Yes.
It's
literally.
like, just record everything. Okay. And then into sales process optimization. So the first thing is you start to introduce some kind of rituals or routines. So just a weekly sales meeting, you're touching on pipeline, talking about forecasts. You also want to make sure that the record keeping and kind of real-time pipeline visibility is tight. So it's like, you want to make sure that you can track meetings, that you can track emails, that you can just track any input possible that influences the trajectory of the probability of a deal. You're all over it. And it's basically like, cool, we just need to make sure that the measurement is in place, and then we'll tune how we report on it and what we're actually trying to measure, but just get everything covered. Cool. Cause then that's the thing where it's like, you don't want to be too radical there. Like, it's not like, whoa, I'm taking over the pipeline, but it's like, you're coming in pretty pessimistic, where it's like, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for optimization here. But the main thing is just like, can I measure what I will need to understand to make improvements? Okay. And then this is sales enablement. This one's pretty generalized, but it's equip the sales team with tools and training. The most important thing is you want to optimize typically for bottom of funnel. So increase the probability that deals are going to close. And case studies are your best friend. And then, you guessed it, this comes back to voice of customer and customer transition and shit. Like, wow, we helped you grow revenue by 30%. That's pretty outstanding. Can you, whatever is an incentive for you for a case study? Great. Boom. So again, you're just killing multiple birds with one stone. And then start to think about lead magnets too. So it's like, cool, we know we've got generally a priority segment identified. We're about to go super hard. We're testing these 2 channels against each other. We're going to associate a lead magnet on the other side. But you're kind of solving for a hyper compelling thing to catch people and a hyper compelling thing to convert people. Worry about there's a lot of variance on this point of view, but middle of funnel, I don't know. Like I don't even know what middle of funnel is, honestly. It's like, dude, there's top and bottom.
At this point, it's just top and bottom. Middle is really supposed to be sales, but sales with success, those two really should be like hit, right? Because the upsell opportunity sometimes comes from success. If not 50% of the time comes from success nowadays. So
And
Yeah,
you're selling the
it's
case
just
studies,
bottom.
period. You're selling outcomes,
Exactly.
you're selling results. So lean on in. And then that's
Everyone at every stage of the funnel within your organization is selling. Even your product person is selling.
and it's a great point of collaboration too, because we talk like it was kind of a bummer that it was like a catch-all, but it's like cross-team, cross-functional, whatever collaboration. But those case studies are a great kind of forcing function for cross-functional collaboration, because it's like, oh, cool. This is the case
Absolutely.
study. Great. Okay, I'm going to grab customers. What was implementation like? How did we get there? Okay, let's talk about product. What did we release during that period? How did, yada, yada. So again,
Yep.
we're looking for things where it's like, oh, if we do this, it solves these 3 or 4 things, aka operating leverage. So that's that. Then we get into revenue planning. So I think this is a strong one. Like you're like, all right, we're 30 days in now. You definitely have a financial model that you use to raise money and that you use to like establish a point of view on what you can do with the business, but you want to tune it. And it's like, cool, this is our goal for the next 60 days. This is what we want to put up with revenue. And again, you want to just urgency, growth, urgency, growth, urgency, growth. This is the culture. Because expect things to slow down and resolve in the mid to long term. So you want to come in and influence that point of departure, because the trajectory should resolve closer to where you started it versus because, things revert to the mean. So, and then this is attached to this, but sales compensation and incentives. So it's like, this is the game plan for revenue. And there is going to be some cool shit on the other side of this if we hit some goals for everybody. So you want everybody to have their head in the game. All right. Now the final third here, day 61 through 90. So now I guess the headlines here, you'll start to, and these work streams are generally kind of evolve, right? So you have like a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of the same work stream. But as it relates to go-to-market strategy, now it's like, okay, we've got some learning from paid ads. We've got some learning from our channel experiments. We've identified a ton of patterns in the voice of customer interviews. Cool. Refine the value proposition, refine everything you can. And it's like, oh man, we thought this, it turns out it's that. Great. Some stuff will be more subtle. But in that final 30 days, you're like refining. It's like, what did we learn in the last 60 days? Great. Let's apply that and go. Prospect universe building. Now you're kind of building on the momentum where we had this surface area. Now we can start to do things like build audiences. We can start to establish kind of a level of or assign a level of priority to aspects based on their position in the segments, etc. So you're now kind of like, cool, we have like this mass that's very enriched and very useful. Let's use all that surface area to build lookalikes, and then let all the tooling, like the ad platforms and all the other stuff, start to really help you. And nowadays there are lookalike account finders. Like there's all kinds of really cool stuff out there. But like, yeah, lookalikes is just a very critical concept. But you need the surface area to get there. Sales documentation, SOPs, finalize and roll them out, train the team if need be. And then sales process optimization. So this is when now you're like, okay, we need to refactor the sales process. It's actually these stages. Here are the exit criteria, or kind of the buying behavior that we need to see signal objectively from the buyer or the buying committee that they're at this place in the sales process, and you get way more rigorous that way. This stuff will then translate into a playbook for the segment, which sales playbooks, there's tons of documentation. Maybe we'll release one. They're all, kind of the same. And then you also want to start to factor lead scoring. So now your enrichment is going to extend beyond that to intent, like website traffic, email engagement, stuff like that. That's that. Okay, now expansion revenue. So don't sleep on expansion revenue. This is probably as part of that universe of customer, like super enriched thing. You should understand who's bought what and who's a candidate for what they haven't bought. So it's like, all right, let's, we've got a point of view on like, what is the overarching lowest hanging fruit, cross-sell or upsell or whatever you want. We just think of it as expansion revenue opportunity. You probably want to kick that off because you're testing that, like the channel and paid ad experiments is kind of going. It's like, this is what our direct sales thing can do. Obviously, learning from the paid ads is very transferable, but it's like, we probably should prioritize expansion revenue, at least in parallel, but obviously focus creates the space for performance. So there are trade-offs there, but do not sleep on expansion in the first 90 days. And the only other thing that I thought about introducing here, or this is kind of an interesting tension in the whole game, is like, you're going to kick off all this go-to-market activity. And, pricing and monetization in your mind should represent as much as a third, maybe more, of go-to-market. So it's tough, but it's like, okay, we're about to kick off all this stuff and acquire customers and expand revenue, and we're going to just stick with the pricing thing. And it's like, maybe we should try to tweak the pricing stuff first, or at least blend in some pricing experiments as we get this other stuff rolling. So I kept it simple and left it out of here, but definitely pricing and monetization's got to be on your mind out of the gate. But don't let it distract you from foundational stuff that is actually totally mission critical, like getting a point of view on your.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that and just saying use some of your early customer interviews to also inform pricing and monetization strategies.
Totally. And that's got to be a big section of the voice of customer interviews. And that shit gets awkward. So you got to be really thorough and thoughtful with your questions. It's not like, what would you pay for this? They're like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to pay what I keep paying. The price is good. And it's like, all right, well, that was a waste of time.
What would I prefer to pay? Free? Like, obviously, you got to get a bit like psychology involved.
Yeah, it's like, well, could it be free? And it's like, no.
Love to, but free. No.
Yeah, I imagine you'd like that. And then performance tracking. So this is when all of a sudden you're like, all right, I know that these are the KPIs that we want to have visibility into. We've got a universe of KPIs at our disposal. Drill down the ones that mean something and stand that up in a scorecard for the business. And you've got kind of generally an overarching business scorecard, which is like, what are the 5 attributes you need to see when you're, sitting on the toilet to feel good about the business? And then the alternative is on a beach, but that's a little more politically correct. And then there's one probably very specific to go to market, which is going to be anchored around top of funnel and then into pipeline. And some really good real-time visibility into that. Because coming out of the 90 days, you need that first thing that you can look at and be like, cool, I know what the engine's running at. I know how much gas we have. I know what the temp is. I know when the last time the oil was changed, and you're feeling good. And then this is touched on, and this is really kind of a day 1 to day 90, but cross-functional alignment. And so the simple ones are product support and sales. Make sure those people are on the same page. Stand up some type of snap together meeting once a week. Or there's different ways to cut that or skin that cat, but that's got to be in your mind. Like you want, no silos. There's no excuse for silos in a micro SaaS context. We've got 10 employees tops. Everybody should be on the same page.
I have 5 teams in mind. Product support and sales are good, but I add marketing and finance. Marketing and finance, they travel all 3 because everyone needs a budget for whatever it is they're going to do with their go-to-market strategy, and then they need messaging for the lookalikes.
That's fair. And I would bundle marketing under sales.
Okay, that's fair.
And then finance is just like my problem usually. Well, I'm like, oh yeah, we got the budget for that, or oh shit, we don't. I better figure it out.
Well, it should be specialized. So in other teams, finance needs to be there to understand, hey, from a financial perspective, what is the unit economic on this one piece of F?
Yeah, totally. And David Sachs is a good one on like the meeting beats and how stuff should snap together. And he's like, marketing snaps together with finance because they give the budget to marketing. Then marketing snaps together with product to understand release stuff and all the other stuff. And then product snaps I can't remember exact, but basically product informs kind of what's happening. And then marketing, blah, blah, blah. And then like sales, it translates in like quotas and campaigns. So that was kind of a bastardized version, but you get the drift.
Yep. I was also going to make one quick sidebar. As entrepreneurs, we need to be kinder to ourselves. A 10th of our workday does not need to be spent on the toilet.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I can't tell you how many times, and this is TMI, but I can't tell you how many times I just go to use the bathroom and I'm like, okay, now I'm applying Slacks, emails. Like, this is the 5 minutes I get to actually apply to things. I'm like, this is not good.
Obviously, my go-to, I swapped Instagram for Databox. I'm just like, I want to know how things are ripping. I've got a few minutes here. I want to see how it's going. So
our Notion scorecard bookmarked on my phone.
Yeah. We're sickos, but yeah, boundaries are good.
Yes.
All right. So I think we'll probably wrap there. And I think hopefully that covered a lot of the substance, and that's a good jump start. I would encourage everybody to jump on the Substack and step into Notion because that's the full Monty there. And feedback, if you think we're thinking about this wrong, if you see opportunity, I would love feedback on the pricing and monetization and how you think about that and when. Could we be thinking more about it, parallel tracking the segments themselves and going like an SMB user-led thing, and maybe it's a really actually dope, nasty lead magnet, and we're going to run that in parallel, and because the objective is to build a balanced pipeline that's mostly mid, and then SMB and a couple enterprise, elephants along the way. Any feedback at all? This is obviously, hopefully, a collaboration. Let's all tune this stuff together. So with that, Kjael, for the love of the game, Jay, same time, same channel next week. Laser beams. All right, buddy. I'll catch you next time.
Until next time.
Peace.